Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155.
From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championship, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon, and as usual, I hope you're doing well for yourself. I hope you, your friends, your family, whether you live in the States or internationally, I hope you're doing fine for yourself, you're healthy, you're safe during a time of major uncertainty. Things are not being cleared right now, and one thing that is very clear is that UFC is pretty much back on track. You know, combat sports is on track again. We got UFC shows happening every single week now. We got a show coming up in 3 days. We have UFC on ESPN, headline with Curtis Blades against Alexander Volkov. That will be a very fun fight. Co-main event, Josh Emmett against Shane Burgos and Raquel Pennington versus Marion Reneau. That's going to be a really fun fight card. But before I talk into UFC on ESPN, I have another topic to get into, and that's about fighter economics. Yes, I've been talking about fighter economics for a long time now. I talk about fighter economics every single episode. And the reason why I talk about fighter economics every single episode is because there's always a fighter complaining about their fight money. More now than ever. And it's getting absolutely ridiculous to this point, and I'm just calling what it is. I'm just seeing what I see, and then I'm going to give my own assessment of it based on my own knowledge of fighter economics. Letting you know right now, I agree with Dana White. I don't know all the ins and outs here. I don't know the exact numbers that these fighters are making. I don't know what the exact numbers are that Mark Hunter's making. I don't know what the exact numbers are that Brock Lesnar's making. All I can do right now is make educated guesses based on the reported estimations that these performers, so these fighters, are making. And so, do I know exactly what John Jones is making or what Jorge Masvidal is making? No, 100% not. There are some things I agree with Dana White and some things I don't agree with Dana White. But I always say this. Your value is relative to your profession. Now, what that means is, it doesn't matter what you think, what your value is to a company or to an organization. Your value is relative to the highest earnings person in the organization. Which means, let's say there's a middle school teacher. He teaches sophomore year high school. He's been working for about 20 years, been teaching kids, making positive impacts to their life, helping all these kids go get A's for 20 years. And his salary is about $70,000 a year. Alright then, what's the average salary for a teacher? Well, average salary for a teacher is about mid-60, late 60K a year. And now let's go to an engineer. One of my friends, I have friends who work as engineers, and also I do have friends who work as teachers. So they always clash all the time as it pertains to economics. So I have an engineer friend who works at Google. He works at Google, and he makes roughly $300,000 a year, and he has an engineering degree from Fresno State University. So even though I got a friend in IRL real life who went to a UC school, UC Riverside, went to a very prestigious school, one of the top 100 schools in the entire world, UC Riverside. And then I got another friend here who went to Fresno State University, not even cracking the 150 top schools in the world based on like US rankings in the world. And he's making $200K. He's making 3 times as much money as a person who went to the UCR school. Not only that, the teacher who went to the UCR school also has a master's degree, which helped him bump himself up to get that $70K a year. So just to recap, I have engineer friend, went to Fresno State University, not a top 100 ranked school, now working for Google, making $300,000. Now, I got another friend, teacher, history teacher, now making $70,000 a year with a master's degree coming from one of the top prestigious universities in the world. How is it that one person can make $70,000 a year, yet another person can make $300,000 a year, even though their level of experience and their educational is vastly different? One person bachelor's degree from a Cal State school, one person master's degree from UC school. Why is their salary so different? Why is it that we can have these journeyman fighters here who will continue to fight for, like Mark Hunt? We'll have journeyman fighters like a Mark Hunt go on, and he can make barely $100,000 a year. Yet we can have somebody like Colby Covington, who, all because he's able to go throw out a lot of random words onto the microphone, can potentially make $50K more than him. Shouldn't you reward Mark Hunt or a Michelle Watterson or Carlos Esparza or these other fighters, Neil Magny? Shouldn't they be rewarded for their longevity in the sports? Shouldn't you reward Michael Johnson for his longevity for a sport? Why are they being paid little compared to Colby Covington, even though their track record and resume arguably outweighs them in their performance in the UFC? I'll say right now, your value is relative to the organization you're working for. And so just like the teacher and engineering job, the engineer, he's working in a field to which making $300,000 a year, that's whatever. That's whatever. The starting salary for an engineer in the Silicon Valley can be somewhere of $125,000 to $150K right now. I got a friend who's only 24 years old making $150,000 a year. 24, $150K. Makes the same amount of money, arguably even more money, than Colby Covington. And he's only 24 years old. And then you look at the teacher side of things. Teachers making $70K. That's above the average. When you're just starting off as a teacher, you're making roughly around $50K a year. Now this brings us towards the end. Now I'm comparing that to boxing and mixed martial arts. In boxing, you can make millions. Millions. Well, more than 3 million, well, more than 5 million. Well, you're going to make tens to 20s, 100 millions. You can make a lot of bucks, and you can make a lot of money in that. And now you go with mixed martial arts, UFC, they can't really pay that much. And so I'm agreeing with Dana White here. I'm agreeing with Dana White in that these fighters are making a whole lot of money. They're making a lot of money and are being paid for what they are worth. And here's the thing. Does anyone here know what the average salary is for the average American? The average salary for an average American is roughly $60,000 a year. And so, if you are making above $60,000 a year, you are doing way, way better than the average daily. You're doing way better than the average Joe in America. If you are making $100,000 a year, then you are considered rich, according to Pew Research Center, when surveying over 1,000 people on what they considered how much money you need to make in order to be considered rich or considered a high class or upper class. All you gotta do is make $100,000. And then when you have a fighter like a Michelle Watterson who will make $40 to $60K per fight and will go fight 2 times a year, or Don Cerrone who will also fight 2 times a year and make, $80K to $100K per fight, these fighters, in theory, if you were to look in the grand scheme of things, are rich. Alright then? These people are rich. Don Cerrone is rich. Anthony Pettis is rich. Nate Diaz is rich. Relative to what other fighters are making in the same organization. Because we got fighters here making $12,000. We got fighters here making $8,000 per fight. We got fighters here making $40,000 per fight. Max Kellerman talked about it in ESPN when he was interviewing with Dana White. And that there is a distinct class system between low, middle, and high class in the world of mixed martial arts. And because of that, a fighter who's being paid $100,000 or $500,000 or $1 million, like those are the money, that's the salaries that John Jones had been making. He's in the higher class. He's in the higher class amongst UFC fighters. So to Dana White, when John Jones says, "Hey, I'm being underpaid," Dana White will just look at the chart and look at all the salaries of all the fighters he's paying, and he's like, "Okay, John Jones, you can't say you're underpaid because in the spreadsheet over here, it says you're one of the highest most paid fighters, and you're one of the higher paid fighters." And then here's where the miscommunication is between fighters and the organization. In that Dana White and the UFC brass, the way how they perceive what is, big money versus what the fighters consider big money is vastly different. Because the highest paid athlete in the UFC can potentially be paid $3 million. So Dana White and the UFC would be like, well, he's being paid amazing. He's the highest paid athlete in our organization. $3 million. Wow, that's way better than that Joe Schmo guy over there who got paid $8,000. And then John Jones or Khabib Nurmagomedov can go, or even like a Holly Holm or Mark Hunt or Brock Lesnar. They can all go and look at every other organization. And that's where the problem lies already. When you're a mixed martial arts fighter, you should look at your own value you should see your own value based on the organization you're working for. And so when someone says, hey, you're rich, you're making a whole lot of money, John Jones or Jorge Masvidal, they can say, no, I'm not rich because I'm comparing myself to a LeBron James out there or to a Deontay Wilder or to a Floyd Mayweather. Like, yes, John Jones is the Ali, the Tyson, the Floyd Mayweather of the UFC, but the UFC is still not boxing. So even though, $3 million, he's like, $3 million in the UFC is comparative to like $50 million doing for boxing. That's the actual like matching value, because the UFC, and compared to money, doesn't make all that much money. Yes, there's a lot of money invested into UFC, but there's a lot more money invested to these other sporting organizations. In the NBA, you are considered an idiot if you make roughly around like $2 million a year. $2 million. The lowest, it used to be like, something like 15 years ago, and that the starting salary, like the minimum you can make, is $750K a year. That is the minimum you can make in the National Basketball Association. Minimum. That's where I've seen athletes, like there's an athlete named Nerlens Noel, where he was really upset over his agents because he was offered a 4-year, $60 million contract. He was offered $60 million for 4 years. And his agent and himself and many analysts would say, oh wow, Nerlens Noel is being screwed here. He's only going to get $60 million. Wow, that's great value for the team that's getting him. Because $60 million over 4 years isn't all that much. That's a good contract for the organization, a bad contract for the player. Because 4 years, $60 million, that money relative to everyone else is not good money. Now, it really bothers me, because now we have, like, Chael Sonnen now, and you really shouldn't, like, listen to whatever Chael Sonnen says, for the most part, unless you're looking, you should only listen to Chael Sonnen if you want to be entertained, but if you want, like, actual insightful stuff, you don't really listen to the guy. And so, for Chael Sonnen, and then we have, like, other fighters calling out, like, Joe Silva, we got Nate Diaz saying, oh, the UFC sees us as cattle and stuff, we got, like, Curtis Blades complaining, we got, like, there's a lot of, Joe Silva becomes a Twitter hashtag as fighters share their bad memories of former. It's complicated. We got Daniel Cormier defending Dana White's position. We got Jorge Masvidal complaining. We got some fighters inside of Jorge, some fighters inside of Dana White and Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier talked about this with Ariel Helwani, where he talked about negotiating with Dana White. And what I took away from it was that, yeah, Daniel Cormier is a real company man. But beyond that, though, Daniel Cormier recognizes that there's no way he will ever make the same amount of money as a Floyd Mayweather, or a LeBron James, or a Tony Hawk, or a Tom Brady. It's not going to happen. It just can't. And it's not because he's not talented. It's not because he lacks talent. It's because his profession only allows him to make that much money. Same thing with being a teacher. You can be the best teacher in the entire world, but you will never make as much money as a beginning level engineer in the Silicon Valley. That's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter how hard that teacher works. It doesn't matter if he goes on to have 30 years and every single student he's ever had for the past 30 years has like all straight A's and end up going to Ivy League or becomes president of the United States. That teacher will not make more money than like a beginner or someone who has 3 years experience working in the Silicon Valley straight out of college as an engineer. And here's the thing. If Jorge Masvidal genuinely believes that he should be paid X amount of money, or John should be paid X amount of money, then guess what? You can leave the profession. Just like a teacher doesn't have to be paid 70 to 80K a year. They can leave that's what a lot of teachers do. A lot of teachers decide to leave after just 3 years and are like, okay, I'm going to start my own business, or I'm going to go and do my master's degree, or my PhD and go towards another field like engineering. A lot of math teachers have a tendency of leaving their math teacher job and becoming engineers because you're making double the amount of money being an engineer than being a teacher. And the same thing can be applied for Jorge Masvidal and John Jones. You can leave and become a boxer. That option is always there. You don't have to agree with whatever. Like Nate Diaz, Nate Diaz, if you genuinely believe you want to make $20 million or $30 million per fight, you don't have to compete for the UFC. You don't. You can just go to boxing. And if you don't think you can cut out in boxing, then stay in the UFC and make the money you can. That's all I have to really say. John Jones can quit his job right now and become a programmer, then 20 years down the line, he can make upwards of $10 million a year. He can do that. Now, does he really want to do that? I'm not really sure. Just do the job you will love to do. That's what matters most. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back after the short break here.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. And so I just talked about how there are fighters complaining about, fighter economics and negotiations happening here. And I said, if a fighter doesn't want to do their job, they can easily quit their job and do something else. And now, there are a lot of fighters out here complaining to former match booker here, Joe Silva, and it's being reported in by MMAJunkie.com and also straight from Chael Sonnen on his YouTube channel. Chael Sonnen defends ex-UFC matchmaker Joe Silva, says fighters forget about the good. Chael Sonnen is not rushing to join the growling list of disgruntled former UFC fighters who have issues with retired matchmaker Joe Silva. In recent days, something of a movement has begun with the hashtag Joe Silva stories. Spreading on Twitter, a number of fighters from former title challengers Gray Maynard and John Fitch to veteran Brendan Schaub and more have aired grievances with how Silva conducted business during his roughly 20-year tenure as a UFC executive. Many of the stories include Silva allegedly being verbally abusive to athletes and implementing cutthroat negotiating tactics. Silva's job wasn't merely to pick two names and match them up, but also the consistent juggle of keeping the size of the roster manageable through signings and releases, ensuring contracts were honored within the obligated window, and scouting the next generation of talent to come through the company. He explained the conditions he worked through in a 2013 interview with MMA Junkie. Sonnen, who fought under the UFC banner 14 times during Silva's run as matchmaker, said his interactions were somewhat in line with what others are describing. The difference, however, is Sonnen had a firm understanding of the many layers and complexities that went into Silva's job. He was really good at what he did, and Joe, this coming from himself, he was really good at what he did, and Joe really deserves a lot of compliments for that. Sonnen said on his YouTube channel, some of the stories from the guys that have been coming out are very mean, and they were very mean because somewhere along the way, Joe had hurt their feelings, and this is like that payback of sorts. But I don't know that if you listen to these guys' stories, and they were largely telling them on social media, you'll also probably miss there's tongue-in-cheek in some of these stories. There was an appreciation for the attitude and the way in which Joe Silva did things. I have my own Joe Silva stories, but they were all positive. Some of them were very familiar to the guys whose feelings show. I just got it. I got Joe from the beginning, and I get he was a hard worker with a ton of stuff to do, and like anybody, there's only so many hours in that day. I also understand there was a very big human element to Joe's job that Joe did not naturally fit. Joe had to become the bearer of bad news. He wanted that job. He put on great matches for all the fans and viewers. Sonnen went on to explain that Silva's role is largely unenviable. For every dream he makes true by signing a fighter, there's the opposite side of the coin, where it's his responsibility to crush those dreams. Sonnen said that Silva had no time to tiptoe around the feelings of each individual while maintaining a roster that grew by hundreds over the course of his career, and that's why he likely came off as a ruthless to so many who dealt with him. When you don't have time to do all the nice and let down and this and that, you just have to come in and pull band-aids off them, because you've got to move one locker room down and do it 2 more times before you get across the hallway and do it 3 more times, all before the press conference. And it said, there's so many things, and that job went so fast, he was short in his time, made him get to the point, and sure, it could make it, it could make it rude, but the bottom line is everything was equal. Yeah, Joe had to give you bad news, but Joe was the guy that called in the first place to make your dreams come true. That gets forgotten over time, and all you remember is a negative interaction. So, are fighters overreacting to their experiences with Joe Silva? So there's a poll here actually on MMA Junkie. Do you pick yes, it couldn't have been that bad, or no, UFC's cutthroat, it makes no sense? Okay, I'm gonna disagree with that. It makes sense that the UFC's cutthroat. It does. And I'm just looking at this. So 56% of people said no, while 44% of people said yes. And Daniel Cormier and Chael Sonnen, they get it. They get the organization. So here's how I view it. And the UFC, this is kind of the UFC's fault, in that the UFC is meant to be the largest it's supposed to be this larger-than-life organization, right? This amazing organization. Like Dana White goes on to say, there's no other athlete or sport organization out there that does what we do. We are special. And you have guys like Chael Sonnen and Daniel Cormier, and Ben Askren and Colby Covington, like they always go out to say the same thing, and that they defend their sports and are like, okay, our sport is amazing, it's special, we got amazing athletes, we got the best athletes in the world out here. I'm not gonna argue that. They're not wrong. They really aren't. But they get it. What a lot of these fighters who defend Joe Silva, and fighters are within the like I'm pretty sure Alexander Hernandez would follow Chael Sonnen and be like, yeah man, like he treated me fine. The thing with Chael Sonnen defending Joe Silva here is that he gets it. And when I say he gets it, I mean he understands his position in the grand scheme of things. In that you have John Jones, you got Kamaru Usman, you got Israel Adesanya, you got Yoel Romero, you got Brock Lesnar. You got these fighters here who are always looking at the big picture and always want more. Alright? And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if somebody's making $1 million, why can't I make $2 million? If I can make $2 million, why can't I make $4 million? If I can make $5 million, why can't I make $10 million? Like, it's not always like you want to build yourself mentality. A lot of fighters have that. A lot of fighters have the tendency of doing this, where they're like, okay, I want to be better tomorrow than I am today, so I'm constantly improving. You hear it all the time. In every UFC countdown. It doesn't matter who it is. They'll always say the exact same thing. I'm improving, I'm becoming better, I'm being the best version that I can possibly be every single day. They always say that exact same phrase all the time. But if you look at like someone like a Chael Sonnen, they'll be like, okay, I am this middle of the ground role fighter. Here's the thing people need to understand about Chael Sonnen and the Ben Askren and the Colby Covington of the world. They recognize that they're not that special, that they're not really a special athlete, that in terms of the physicals, they're not really all the way there, and that the only way they can get people to notice them is through their ability to go talk in the mic and, trash talk. Because they recognize that their physicals aren't that impressive, that they have a really low ceiling compared to other fighters. If you say, okay, who has a higher ceiling? Sean O'Malley? Like young Chael Sonnen or young Sean O'Malley? Who has a higher ceiling? It's Sean O'Malley. And Chael Sonnen, his ceiling is very low. Like, his potential is much more... a young Chael Sonnen and a young Sean O'Malley. Chael Sonnen's potential is much more lower than Sean O'Malley. And because of that, he has to do other things to reach that ceiling, compared to Sean O'Malley, to which it's just a maybe. So, Chael Sonnen, he's doing everything he can to maximize his profits, to make the most out of any situation, while a fighter like a John Jones, Chael Sonnen, and Israel Adesanya are out there, they want to break that class ceiling. I know, it's kind of a self-defeatist attitude if you really think about it, when Chael Sonnen's like, you know what? I made a whole lot of money in the UFC. Yeah, I didn't make, $5 million. it gets because it gets frustrating. It really does, because when you look at the UFC, it doesn't make all that much sense. It really doesn't, because you'll have a fighter like a Conor McGregor or Ronda Rousey, two of arguably the biggest mainstream stars of all time in UFC history. They have this like larger than life attitude where they don't like those two fighters. If they are active still, those two fighters never had that mentality of like, okay, I'm just a Joe Schmo, and I'll make the most out of my experience here, and I'll try to make the most money as I can. No, that wasn't their deal. Their attitude was, I want to be the greatest ever, and I want to push barriers, I want to push boundaries. I want to break that glass ceiling. And a lot of fighters have that mentality, just like Conor, just like Ronda. And that they want to break the glass barrier. They want to break through that ceiling. And that's why they are so frustrated, because they are not going to get through that. They're not going to get through that ceiling. They don't. Even as someone as great as John Jones, or even as someone as great as Matt Nunes, they're never going to break through that glass ceiling that Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey have done. They just can't, because a lot of it pertains to being business savvy, being naturally talented, having great charisma, being able to put yourself out there in a position that no one else really wants to, and, strike and go with it. There is a luck aspect to being successful, not just in mixed martial arts, in life. There is a luck aspect. That's why you will have like some fighters or like some people in the world generally be like, hey, wait a minute, I did the same thing that guy did, but why can't I get anything? It's kind of like dating a girl, where you'd have two dudes and you have this one girl, two dudes do the exact same thing, but the girl picks the one guy, and then the secondary guy who didn't get picked is like, that's not fair, I can do the exact same thing as the one guy you chose. But that's just the luck of the draw. That's the weird, sad reality of things, in that these fighters have these super high expectations of themselves, or they have a certain expectation of themselves to reach a certain goal. And once they can't reach that goal, they have the tendency of complaining and whining. And now you have someone like Chael Sonnen, who doesn't have overly high aspirations of himself, and is like, okay, I'll just make the most out of this situation here, and I'll maximize my profits as much as I can, because I am not as naturally talented or as naturally gifted as all these other athletes. So I'm gonna work on what I can do. I'm gonna talk and overhype myself as if I'm a pro wrestler in the 90s. That's Chael Sonnen's shtick. And the reason why he's not complaining compared to these other fighters who are complaining is because those fighters thought a lot of themselves, and they had bigger dreams than Chael Sonnen did. While Chael Sonnen, being, Uncle Chael he is like, you know what? Whatever. I made a whole lot of money. In the grand scheme of things, like, I made more money than the average American. Yes. But everybody wants to make more money than the average American. Not only that, people want to go beyond that. People want to go beyond just going. They want to go beyond the above average American. I know. Once again, I have engineering friends. I got engineering buddies who are making $300,000 a year. They can be like Chael Sonnen and be like, you know what? I'm making above average money right now. I'm settled. Or what they're doing right now, they're actively trying to like make $500K right now. They're trying to push their way. They're trying to work their way, trying to go through promotions into getting $500,000 a year. And if they don't get that, they get frustrated. There are a lot of people who work in Google and Facebook, who work in Silicon Valley as engineers or as computer programmers, who can make $300,000 a year and then leave. And this has happened. Just go on YouTube. Go on YouTube, type up like engineer, quit job, and the first thing they'll say is, yeah, I was making like $300,000 a year, and my sign-in bonus was an extra like $80,000. Like I was like, wow, in 1 year, you made nearly $500,000. In just your like mid to late 20s. That's amazing. And then they go on to say, well, but I was unhappy because they didn't pay me what I think my value was. And I'm like, wow, how could you say that they are underpaying you even though you made $480,000 working just 1 year in your career and only like at the age of 28? How can you do that to yourself? And it's because, just like those engineers, all these fighters who are complaining right now, who complain about, fighter economics and like for the Vipers and the money, they just expect more out of themselves. And if you're from the camp of the Chael Sonnen, Ben Askren, Colby Covington, like Joe Rogan, you can be like, you know what, that's fine. Or even Dana White's like, that's fine. I'm making a lot of money, I'm settled. But not everyone wants to settle. Everyone always wants more. And if you're the type of person who's fine settling, Michelle Watterson, Paul Felder, Brian Stan, they're settled. they're not asking for anything more. I think Michelle Waterson knows that as good as a fighter she is nowhere in the same league as any of the women in the top 4 of the women's Charlotte rankings. Like, who does anyone genuinely believe Michelle Waterson can go toe to toe and defeat Weili Zhang? No, and I love Michelle Waterson. She's a great underrated fighter, but she is nowhere near the same level as a Jessica Andrade, as a Rose Namajunas, as a Joanna Jędrzejczyk, which is obvious when you look at Michelle Waterson's performance. I get to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, I get to Weili Zhang, I get to Valentina Shevchenko, I get to Amanda Nunes. Michelle Waterson is, you can't see her achieve that level. And the same thing can be said about Brendan Schaub. Brendan Schaub, there's no way he can achieve the same level as a Brock Lesnar, or a Stipe, or a Daniel Cormier. But those fighters, they're settled. They're settled with what they have. And although Brendan Schaub, he's complaining about it, he settled in his career post-fight, like at his post-fighting career. So it's kind of different for him. And Jorge Masvidal mentions this. Like, Daniel Cormier thought it was a jab on him. Jorge Masvidal was talking about how you got these like former fighters coming at him, saying that he should be more humble and more appreciative of the position he is in because he's able to go fight and make a whole lot of money. Well, that's their case. They're fine at making $100K a year. Some fighters want to make $500K a year. Same thing with the NBA. There are some athletes out there who are perfectly fine making $1 million a year, and there are some athletes out there who are happy if they make $50 million a year. There are even some athletes who are not happy if they're only making $25 million a year. Everybody's different. Everybody has different expectations of themselves. And what one person values as a lot of money or as, good quality pay is different from another person. And that doesn't just pertain to mixed martial arts. That pertains to all jobs. As a fight fan, all I want to see is see the best fighters out there compete and get paid handsomely. That's all I care about as a fight fan. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back right after a short break here.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So we were talking about fighter economics here, and the person that popped up into my newsfeed was people's opinions on Conor McGregor's retirement. I don't really believe it. I think no one really believes right now. It's just whatever at this point. I expect him to come back to the fight game. Now, he's made a lot of money. That's for sure. Dana White said it before. He's like, Conor McGregor, he's made a lot of money. He can just stop right now and just, stay at home, become a dad. Well, the same thing can be said about Dana White. He can literally just stop right now, leave his job, and relax. But, Dana White, he enjoys his job. For as much as he complains about it, he enjoys what he's doing. And the same thing can be said about Conor McGregor. I think he loves the spotlight and loves competing as an athlete. So, I don't really see Conor McGregor, officially retiring until it's 5 years down the line in the future. And Conor McGregor has a dad bod and he's just chilling at home. I don't really believe at this point. But we got a UFC fight night coming up in 3 days, this upcoming Saturday here. And I got the betting odds over here. We got Curtis Blaydes coming in as the overwhelming favorite against Alexander Volkov. Really? I'm thinking about that. Really? Is it that much of a favorite here? I don't really think so. I really don't. I'll put 160, about less than 200, as a favorite for Curtis Blades over Alexander Volkov. But really, Volkov can win this. I wouldn't be surprised if Volkov were to somehow pick apart Curtis Blades through 5 rounds. No way. This fight has to end via decision because I don't see Volkov defeating Blades through 5 rounds. I don't think either of them has the cardio for that. But Blades has a tendency of going all aggro on Volkov, and Volkov has a tendency of struggling when he gets over. Volkov can get overwhelmed very easily, so it makes sense for Curtis Blades here to be the heavy favorite against Volkov. But don't count out Blades. Don't count out Shane Burgos versus Josh Emmett. That's a close fight. We got minus 135 here. Raquel Pennington versus Marion Reneau. Really, I picked Reneau defeating Raquel Pennington. Pennington is coming in at minus 140. It makes because if you look at Pennington's track record versus Reneau, Pennington's better in a track record. But in terms of style wise, I say Reneau edges Pennington out just a little. We got Bilal Muhammad going in at minus 145 against Lyman Good. There's a lot of close fights here. Wow. Roosevelt Roberts versus Jim Miller, minus 230. Yes, that's an obvious agreement right there for me. Bobby Green versus Clay Guida. Clay Guida is still fighting. Bobby Green coming at minus 230. That's an one I definitely agree with. Matt Frivoli coming at minus 115 against Frank Camacho. Frank Camacho is going in only at minus 105. Oh, close. Oscar Pechoda versus against Marc-Andre Barriot at minus 130. Another close fight. Brianna Van Buren versus Tecia Torres. Brianna Van Buren is the favorite against Tecia Torres because Tecia Torres in her past 5 fights has gone through a skid. And for that reason, I gotta go for Brand. Jill Robertson versus Courtney Casey. Toss up, I go for... Casey? I'm putting my money on Casey, honestly, just because Casey's past 3-5 outings have been a lot more difficult than Robertson has. Roxanne Modafferi coming in as minus 120 versus Lauren Murphy, who's plus 100. Wow, Roxanne Modafferi's a favorite here, but not by that much. So Modafferi's coming in at minus 120. I've been surprised by Modafferi, but at the same time, I've also been disappointed by her. It's going to go either way, but Modafferi is, in her past 3-fight performances, she edges out Lauren Murphy here. Then Max Roshkoff versus Austin Hubbard there. I'm not really sure about those 2 fighters, but overall, this entire fight card, with the exception of the main event, is full of close betting odds, which is astounding. So this is coming in from CBSSports.com, to which we have people of the sports staff giving their own viewpoint of the fights and how they view it. I view it as Curtis Blades overwhelms Alexander Volkov in the first round. That carries over towards second round. Second round, Curtis Blades knocks out Volkov. But if this turns out to a drag-out fight, Volkov wins. So if Volkov can make it past the second half of the second round, Volkov wins his fight. That's how I view it. Curtis Blades is known for his world-class wrestling, but he counts on his opponent's underestimation of his power. That approach has worked for the UFC's third-ranked heavyweight, who faces 7th-ranked Alexander Volkov in the main event of the UFC for Fight Night, Blades vs. Volkov, on Saturday in Las Vegas. Their battle closed the curtain on the 12-fight card. It's amazing. 12-fight card, wow. With the main UFC Fight Night rescheduled at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Blades is a former champion collegiate wrestler, but has seen 10 of his 13 professional fights win by KO or knock, and that's so weird. So Curtis Blades does have a wrestling background, but he's never ever used it. He faces a litmus test against Alexander Volkov, who has seen 2 of his past 3 victories come by stoppage. Blades is a minus 400 favorite, risk is $400 to win $100, while Volkov is offered at plus 320 in the latest Blades versus Volkov odds by William Hill. In the co-main event atop the UFC card, Shane Burgos is coming at minus 135, takes on Josh Emmett, who's plus 115, in a matchup of top 10 featherweights before locking your UFC Fight Night. Blades versus Volkov picks. Make sure you see what's but it just goes on forever about promoting betting and gambling. I'm not a gambling person, but if you do, yeah. I just found a headline here that RDA says he's challenging Conor McGregor to any weight. Not happening. It's just not. It's getting to the point now where it's getting absolutely ridiculous. Where everyone is challenging Conor McGregor. Everyone is. It's not even good press or oh wow, this fighter's promoting himself, or man, he's putting himself over so he can impress the brasses up there at the UFC that he's willing to go and fight anybody, including the top star. Just no. This doesn't make anyone look good. It's just annoying. It's just really annoying having fighter number 200 or 37th over here of the week go and challenge Conor McGregor. It's getting ridiculous now. So this is coming in from MMAJoker.com. The Holly Holm says, there's a reason I keep getting UFC title shots, and another could come. Holly Holm hasn't given up on her quest to regain UFC gold, and she's confident beating Irene Aldana in their upcoming headliner could set up another title shot. Holly Holm, who is 13-5, 6-5 in the UFC, has been caught up in some backlash for the number of championship opportunities she's received since losing the women's bantamweight title. Makes sense. In March 2016, after winning it with an all-time knockout on Ronda Rousey at UFC 193, she's fought in 3 title bouts across 2 divisions, with her most recent chance being a first-round TKO loss to Amanda Nunes in July 2019 at the UFC 239. I remember that because Holly Holm, for some reason, was leapfrogging everyone else in the division. Like, she leapfrogged over, like, Chukagian, Jessica Ai, and Joanne Calderwood for no real reason other than the fact that she's known as a Holly Holm person, as the one who knocked out Holly Holm. She's since rebounded with the unanimous decision win over Raquel Pennington at UFC 246 in January, and now home number 7 in the latest USA Today rankings. Women's bantamweight rankings is set to fight number 5 Aldana in the main event spot of August 1 at the UFC Apex facility in Las Vegas. If she can win that, Holly Holm said she could definitely be next in line for the belt, despite what critics might think. I've fallen short of getting that title back more than once, and it's frustrating, but I know I keep fighting the very top-ranked girls, so I'm constantly right there. At the point that she defeated Raquel Pennington was a top 5 ranked fighter, but then she went through a skid. So now in hindsight, it's not that impressive. I'm still aching for her. I still want it. There's a lot to say. Some people say, oh, I want the belt, but then they don't really think about it. I know exactly how much that takes to get there, and I know it took a big commitment. You've got to win fights along the way, and when it comes, I can let the opportunity slip through. I'll through my fingers again. Obviously, it's right there. I know people say, oh, she's had plenty of title fights. There's a reason, because I keep fighting the best, and I keep staying right there. A lot of times, I'm just one fight away no matter what. I have Irene Aldana in front of me. Holly Holm's original title run was relatively brief. That shocked the world when she knocked out Ronda Rousey, dating back to November 2015. Although there are plenty of perks that come with being a UFC champion, such as a greater pay and notoriety, Holly Holm said her reasons are purely selfish. It's just knowing I'm number 1. It's not necessarily the recognition to other people. It's not trying to prove other people wrong. I work so hard that I want to beat the best so that I can be the best. That's it. When you have the belt on you, that means you're number 1. You're the best. Alright. Let's take a step back here. What has Holly Holm been doing in her past 5 fights here? Because she's been saying she wants to go compete against the best. Well, she wants to compete against in the bantamweight division now. All right, then let's look at her past performances. Then, is she really deserving? The Raquel Pennington fight, yes. Okay, so dating back to when she defeated Ronda Rousey. She is 3-5 since defeating Ronda Rousey, which was back in 2015. She's 3-5. 3-5, and she gets title shots. So she defeated Ronda Rousey, one of the greatest knockouts, one of the greatest moments ever in UFC history, without a doubt about it. Change the landscape of mixed martial arts. Okay, I'm not arguing it's about that. She lost against Miesha Tate. She lost against Valentina Shevchenko. She lost against Germaine Randomay. She defeated Beth Correia and had a performance of the night bonus. Good for you on that. And now she lost to Chris Cyborg. Won against Megan Anderson. And then lost to Amanda Nunes. And then won against Raquel Pennington. Okay, so the fight with Raquel Pennington was just recently. Alright then. Let's look at one of her bigger fights here. Beth and... oh my gosh, okay. I'm looking at this right now. Yeah, I agree with other people. Holly Holm shouldn't be getting title shots. She really shouldn't, though. Now, depending on how great her performance is against Aldana here, maybe you might argue that. But I'm looking right now. Okay, so there's nothing wrong losing to fighters like Germaine Randomay and Valentina Shevchenko. And so the most notable win she's had in the past 5 years was against Megan Anderson. That's her most notable win. I'm not putting her win against Raquel Pennington, and that's not me disrespecting Raquel Pennington. That's just Raquel Pennington's right now her place in the bantamweight division. I wouldn't say it's among the elite, alright? Now, this isn't a jab saying, Raquel Pennington's a great fighter. And as compared to the other fighters within the top 5, I don't really push her that high. She defeated against Beth Correia. Okay, great for you on that. But as of right now, she's ranked number 13. Megan Anderson. Okay, that's the biggest win she's had in the past 5 years. You shouldn't be rewarded a title fight just because you lost against top-ranked fighters. I don't. That's not how it works. You beat top-ranked fighters, so that qualifies you to go and compete against the number one fighter in the division. That's how it works. If that's the case, then like if Agapova ends up becoming the women's flyweight champion, Hannah Cifers can't just argue, well, I fought against the best in Agapova, so I should get a title fight. No! That's not how it works. It really doesn't. And when you look at the Miesha Tate versus Holly Holm, if you actually lived through that moment, Miesha Tate's shtick at the time was that she was only as good. The only reason why she won the belt from Holly Holm was because Ronda Rousey was in there. And that really is it. Like, Miesha Tate, sadly, her career will be known as the woman who was second place behind Ronda Rousey. And then Holly Holm lost to that girl. She lost to Valentina. Valentina, one of the best fighters out there in the entire world. One of the pound-for-pound best fighters in all of mixed martial arts. You lost that fight. You didn't win. So you don't move up in ranking through losing. Okay, see, I'm saying that, but yet Dominic Cruz was like able to do that. I think right now Dominic Cruz is like ranked number 11. But no. He was like ranked number 13. Was number one, was considered the number one contender against Henry Cejudo. He lost against Cejudo. Then through his loss, bypassing 12 other fighters in the division, he ended up going to like number 11th rank. It's absolutely ridiculous. It just doesn't make any much sense. It doesn't. Holly Holm is still kind of... The sad truth about Holly Holm is that she's working off the notoriety of being the one who knocked out Ronda Rousey 5 years ago. And I understand why there are a lot of fighters complaining about it. Now, if Holly Holm defeats Aldana, then I think she might deserve a title shot. Maybe. So when I look at the rankings right now, a name that stands out, Germaine de Randamie, she should get the next crack on Amanda Nunes, if Nunes doesn't retire. But let's say, hypothetically, Nunes does retire. It makes sense to book Germaine de Randamie against Holly Holm. But also makes sense to book Germaine de Randamie against Juliana Pena or Aspen Ladd. Because when I look at the division right now, the fighters that stand out more than anyone else would be who could compete against Nunes. Randamie, Holly Holm, Juliana Pena, Aspen Ladd. That's about it. Raquel Pennington is going to fight against Marion Reneau in 3 days. And depending on what happens on that card, then we might see Raquel Pennington fight against Holly Holm again. Probably not. Though that is a real possibility. Right now, the stake of the women's bantamweight division, it all is on Amanda Nunes. Is she going to retire? Is she not going to retire? She says she's not going to compete for the rest of the year. We might see her early to mid next year at this time. So the women's bantamweight division right now is kind of up in the air because we don't know what the status is right now on Nunes. Germaine de Randamie is still waiting. Germaine de Randamie, she's still waiting. She's still waiting for a time. She hasn't fought anybody since she fought Amanda Nunes. Germaine de Randamie is still in that mindset that, okay, I'm not going to fight anyone else. I'm going to stick to my ranking here because I know that I deserve a rematch. Personally, for me, I think it would be a great fight if we saw Germaine de Randamie against Holly Holm. That's a possibility of happening. But as of right now, we don't know what to expect from the UFC bantamweight division until we know the status of Amanda Nunes. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back right after the short break here.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back. And so, in just 2 days from now, we'll be nearing the 10-year anniversary of Team Chuck Liddell versus Team Tito Ortiz from The Ultimate Fighter. I'll just tell you right now, if those two fighters were at their prime and they were to do a show now, like, because right now I do know that the UFC, they're going to redo the Ultimate Fighter again. There's going to be a brand new season. It's going to be restarted again. And I am excited for it. If they're to do Tito Ortiz versus Chuck Liddell in their primes, and you're to bring them nowadays, money. It would be the most funnest show you can ever watch. So to me right now, the most fun Ultimate Fighter series I've seen was Uriah Faber versus Team McGregor. Just because those two fighters, they just got it. They were super hilarious the entire way. And also, it pretty much like Team Alpha Male versus here's Connor and a bunch of other dudes who are dressed as Connor. It was such a carny show. Because Team Alpha Male, like it's just Uriah Faber and he has his Team Alpha Male guys. There's an episode where they came to the house. And they're like, hey man, what's up? Party time here. But no one in the house was interested partying with Team Alpha Male. Because Team Alpha Male was like full of these like super lame, like 5'6" short dudes. And like, you see, in Uriah Faber being like this like veteran wise man of the group here, he's wearing sandals and stuff, and he's like bro talk with Cody Garbrandt, who's like 12 years younger than him. It's so weird. I don't like it. I don't like it when I see guys who try to act younger than they actually are. I'm not really a fan of that. Like, Uriah Faber reminds me of like, The Situation. If you guys remember, there's a show called The Jersey Shore, and there's a guy called Mike the Situation. And Mike the Situation was like a decade older than everybody else, but he still likes to act as if he's like a young dude who's like in his early 20s. There's just such a college frat boy identity that pertains to Team Alpha Male. And then when you like have that personality as like Team Alpha Male, and then you deal with Conor McGregor's larger than life lifestyle, constantly yelling, saying, you got this, beautiful, son. He's like, giving 2 thumbs up. He's sweating all over. He's wearing his sunglasses indoors. He's wearing sunglasses during interviews. He's wearing sunglasses as he's in the backstage or in the locker room talking to his fighters. It's a hilarious sight to see. If you guys haven't watched it yet, watch Team McGregor versus Team Uriah Faber, Ultimate Fighter. It's one of the best series. It's one of those like, funniest, most enjoyable seasons you're ever going to watch of any TV show. And you have Team Liddell versus Team Ortiz. And seriously, by 2010, you could say that Liddell and Ortiz were pretty much past their prime. I would say peak Ortiz, peak Liddell was around like 2008. Yeah, I say 2008, and then like Ortiz was like mid to early 2000s. So by the time 2010 happened, when I saw this, I was like, really? These 2 guys? It led to the match between Rich Ace Franklin versus Chuck Liddell, because the Ortiz-Liddell 3 didn't happen. No, that's correct. It did in fact happen, but it happened like 10 years later in what turned out to be like probably the most saddest fight you're ever going to see, next to like BJ Penn versus Ryan Hall. It was really sad. And then, so the main event of this card here was Court McGee versus Chris McRae. Then we got light heavyweight Matt Hamill defeated Keith Jardine by majority decision. Oh man, Matt Hamill versus Keith Jardine. I think there was a movie based on Matt Hamill's career, and Keith Jardine was a fan favorite. Not because he was like a great fighter or anything else, but because like he just fought so weird and different. Like he fought the monkey style against Chuck Liddell, which was like the most carniest you can ever think of. And then we had Chris Leben against Aaron Simpson, to which Chris Leben was on his way up. He knocked out Aaron Simpson in just a second round, 4 minutes 15 seconds in. We got Dennis Teever against Spencer Fisher, 2 guys who were climbing up the rankings in lightweight at the time. And then we got Rich Antonito against Jamie Yeager. Jamie Yeager was one of the contestants of the show. He didn't really do that much past the show. And then prelim card, we had John Gunderson against Mark Hoist. Brad Tavares against Seth Bakinski. Brad Tavares, he's probably like the 3rd most successful person in this entire card. And we got Kyle Noak against Josh Bryan, Chris Kamazi against James Hammertree. James Hammertree, he doesn't have his own Wikipedia page, which is weird, because James Hammertree was a personal fan favorite of mine. I was cheering for Court McGee and Hammertree to go win this contest. But the first fight of the entire card was Travis Brown against James McSweeney. If you're going to tell like Travis Brown what happens to him in the next 10 years, that isn't. Court McGee, he ended up winning submission of the night. What's funny about reading about this is that submission of the night was automatically given every night, every UFC pay-per-view event, or every UFC event. And so, if there were 12 fights that were happening, and 11 of those fights ended by decision, but 1 fight ended by submission, that one submission victory gave him submission of the night, and that has been taken away from him. Now it's like, okay, in order to win submission of the night, your submission better have to be actually good. Instead, it was just a rear naked choke, and I'll say what like Matt Hughes said, and like everybody and anybody can do a rear naked choke. There is skill involved to it, though, but it's almost like least skillful submission hold anyone could ever do. And so Court McGee ended up winning submission of the night, and then submission night gets taken away from him. Knockout of the night goes to Chris Lieben, obviously, and Fight Night Game 2, Matt Hamill versus Keith Jardine. Oh, man, that was a fun. That is a really fun matchup to go watch. And then we look at Court McGee. Court McGee, he's only 35. He was only 26 when the show actually happened. Now he's 35, turning 36 now. And I'm trying to look what happened to Court McGee. So Court McGee actively right now, he is a recovering heroin addict, and he actively just talks to anti-drug campaigns, to teenagers, and launched an online Hope 361 project to help addicts to the path of recovery. So good for you, Court. You know, if things are turning out well for you in the UFC, you can become, you can do something else. I don't mind at all. Oh, wow. So Court McGee is still kind of active? That's a strange, right? He's still kind of active. And so what's happening here right now is that upon winning the Ultimate Fighter, he was 12-1. He had a win against Ryan Jensen, Dong Yang. Then he lost against guys who were just outside the top 10 or at the top 10 rankings here, like number 8 through 10, against Costa Filippo and Nick Ring. And then from there he fought against Josh Neer. He had a victory over Robert Whittaker. Split decision victory, but he had a victory over Robert Whittaker. So he can brag about that, man. Defeated against the former champion. Sweet for him. Then from then on, he became pretty much a journeyman here. He went from defeating Robert Whittaker, which is without a doubt probably the biggest win of his entire career. Just because in hindsight, we now know how good Robert Whittaker is. He then lost against guys like Ben Saunders, Sean Strickland, Diego Lima. No, actually, Diego Lima is a really solid fighter. So Court McGee's last fight in the UFC was just January, 7 months ago. He fought 7 months ago against Sean Brady. That's interesting. I don't remember that. I love Court McGee and Hammer Tree, but I don't remember Court McGee was that active since I thought he was let go. But no, the last time Court McGee was in a UFC pay-per-view event was at UFC 194, which was 5 years ago. Since then, he's been competing constantly on UFC Fight Night shows. He's been on UFC on Fox, UFC Fight Night, Fight Night Event, Fight Night Event, Fight Night Event, Fight Night. He's been in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's been on 6 straight UFC Fight Night events. 6 straight. He's been in the UFC for nearly 10 years at this point, and he's competed in 4 UFC pay-per-view events. Every other event has been a UFC Fight Night event or a UFC on ESPN event or on Fox. Yikes! So I'm happy for Court McGee in the sense that he's recovering through heroin addiction. There's it coming here. McGee is a former heroin addict, and in 2005 he was declared clinically dead after overdosing in heroin at his cousin's house before he was resuscitated. McGee had to learn to walk, speak, and function again after his first overdose. McGee said that his path into drug and alcohol abuse began when he started to hang out with the wrong people. Drugs, partying with the bad kids. After suffering injury to his clavicle and elbow, McGee became dependent on painkillers, which he later mixed with alcohol. Yikes. McGee had taken cocaine and heroin before overdosing after his near-death experience. McGee suffered a couple of relapses. On an episode of The Ultimate Fighter, McGee said, "I took one drink in Vegas and I ended up in Iowa 4 days later with no pants on and a long-sleeve shirt looking for meth. I was strung out, the heroin addict, the drunk, the liar, the cheat, the thief. That's who I thought I was. I never thought I was going to amount to anything." But, since April 2006, McGee has been clean and uses his story to encourage those who may be struggling with addictions of his own. Thank you, Court McGee. He launched an online project named Hope 361, where addicts would share their stories and receive positive messages, and connects addicts with rehab facilities. McGee regularly visits prisons, rehab, and youth correctional facilities, schools and churches, and gives speeches on anti-drug campaigns and facilitate rehab programs to those who need it. This coming in from himself. Drug addiction is not biased. It doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, religion doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much money or how little money you have. Drug addiction is a non-biased, and it tears everybody up. So he wants to be able to provide a tool for people to use those who are afflicted around them. So I'm happy for him, dude. He's happy that he is, I'm always supportive of any fighter that has secondary projects beyond fighting. Because right now, I'm dialing this back down to fighter economics again, in that these fighters need to recognize that, not just fighters, but everybody should always try to have a side gig. That's up front. Like, I have a side gig. I have a side gig. I have friends who work as engineers in Google and Facebook who have side gigs. And it's because it is so... I'm not saying it is difficult to make money. A lot of people are finding struggle making money. But it's just... It's difficult trying to maintain the right amount of money for you to sustain yourself. That's what I'm saying here. Because the truth is, being a person who studied in the Silicon Valley, when you start looking like at the framework of the Silicon Valley and you extend yourself outward, the more you expand your knowledge of the overall world and of how like some facets of the entertainment industry, you begin to recognize how you begin to look at money very, very differently. That's what I'm saying here. So, in the UFC, when you have a fighter like Michelle Watterson, who's making like 40 to 80K per fight, making 40 to 80K per fight, and every year she's making about 130K per fight, and then that's not including whatever money she makes through her doing commentary, announcing, or doing fight previews. So you can say, well, Michelle Watterson, she's making a lot of money for herself. She's making nearly 3 times as much money as the average American. And one might say, well, that's good enough. But then when you start like taking like a scope, like when you start scoping out of that, and you begin to realize how big Michelle Watterson is compared to, you know, the other people in the world in terms of economics, well, you start beginning to realize how small the world you pay attention is. So the UFC is, within the world of mixed martial arts, is big time, larger than life. It's the #1 mixed martial arts organization in the world. Without that, it's a one of the kind organization with one of a kind events, one of a kind athletes. But then you take a step back and realize, wow, you know, just these fighters may be above average in terms of, you know, the money they make compared to the regular Joe Schmo human being, but they make chump change compared to athletes around the world. And that's why a lot of athletes are complaining of a lot of these mixed martial arts fighters, they see themselves as global athletes and as a brand. Like, look at Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley's shtick right now is that he doesn't really care that much about being a fighter, and is more prioritized over his brand. Conor McGregor, according to Dana White, says that Conor McGregor can consistently make a whole lot of money for himself just sitting down in a chair because his liquor business is doing really well for himself, Proper 12. And even then, when you take a step look back, or when you like scope out Conor McGregor is making chump change compared to somebody the likes of LeBron James, or a Floyd Mayweather, or a Stephen Curry, or a Giannis Antetokounmpo, or an Anthony Davis, or a Leonardo DiCaprio. To Joe Rogan. That's the strange part. Joe Rogan just made $100 million. Okay, he signed a $100 million contract. And even then, Joe Rogan, being a person who analyzes the grand scheme of the world, he's like, okay, yeah, I am rich right now, but I know there are like, I think 4,000 billionaires. I forgot the number, but some said there are 4,000 billionaires in the world. 4,000. So when you think of something like Donald Trump, or even like Jeff Bezos, or the Facebook guy, and here's the thing, I'm not trying to be like the conspiracy guy here, but there is a certain group of people out there who have so much money that it's hard to even grasp what real rich is. I remember doing a study on this, and that there's like lower class, middle class, upper class, rich, and then beyond. And that the beyond is so rich, we ourselves can't even process it. And so when we think of billionaires right now, even then, billionaires are just the rich, but there's a level beyond the rich, and everyone is always trying to elevate themselves up. In life, it certainly feels like it's a race to whoever can get up the fastest or the highest. And while there are some people who are like that, there are others, like a Chael Sonnen, who's like, okay, you know what? I'm fine staying in this upper class system. I don't care about being rich. I don't care about being beyond that. I'm just fine being upper class. And I'm settled. And I'm happy with that. And that brings to a close for today's episode. All I gotta say is thank you. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask Lee, please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.